Okay, now we have what we need to start creating the building and floor nodes. I'm just going to very quickly here go to Building Designer and open the Floor Manager. And just want you to note there we don't have a building or floor created yet. We just have the template in there. So let's close that. I'm going to go over to my node types. I'm going to scroll up to the AECOsim Building Designer nodes. And you'll notice there's a building node and there's a floor node. So just as in AECOsim Building Designer, you can't create floors until you have a building. Same is true here. So we need to create a building node. So I'm going to right-click on the building node. You can see I only have a few techniques here, and we're going to use the Create New Building. So I'm going to select that one. That's going to put the building node on my graph. Just going to slide it over there a little bit. Now we do want to give the building a catalog item. That is required. We're going to pick from the pick menu here. There is only one appropriate catalog type, so that's building, and there's only one item there, the default. Then we need to give the building a base elevation. We're just going to start here at 0. And then we can actually give the building a name. This is the name that will appear in the Floor Manager. So I'm going to call it GC Hotel. Now note, this is a different kind of input. This is actually a text string. Text strings always have to go in single quotes. So you want to make sure you leave the single quotes there. And let's go to the Transactions tab and record that transaction. Now that we have a building, we can actually start creating floors. So I'm going to go back to my node types, and this time I'm going to select the floor. I'm going to right click and select a technique. Now we are creating a new floor, and since the only node we have is a building, we're going to use the Create at Building. So I'm going to select that one. Actually, I'm going to just drag it right here under the building. Now we're going to have several floor nodes, so I'm going to actually rename the floor nodes. I'm going to call this one Floor Lobby. Again, we have to select a catalog item, so we can select from the pull down. Now we have to link this to the owning building. So in other words, we're just going to link it back to the building node. Then our next input is to give the floor a name. So again, this is the name that shows up in the Floor Manager. So I'm just going to call it Lobby. Again, want to make sure you leave the single quotes there. There's actually a few more inputs we need for this. I'm going to go ahead and double click and open it in the node properties over here. So we can see all these properties. You notice because it has data group catalog data on it, we do get all those properties here, which could be set here just as they are in the Floor Manager. So we can put in our finished floor elevation. We'll leave it at 0. This is the first floor of the building. We could put in a description, but as we go down here, we want to go ahead and put in the typical floor height. Now this is where we can use one of our sliders, which was the Z lobby height. And that should generate that first ground floor of the building. So let's go to the transactions and we'll record that floor. Then I'm going to go back to the node types. I'm going to create another floor. Now this is our guest room floors. And we could actually create this as a group of typical floors. And you can see we have a technique, Create Typical Floors. So I'm going to select that one. So I'm going to rename this one as Floor Guest Rooms. Again, we need to link it to a building. Then we have the typical floor group name. Now again, this is a name, which means it's a text string, which means we need to put single quotes. So I'm going to call this group Guest Rooms. Now it needs a base elevation. Well, again, that base elevation is going to be our Z lobby height because it has to start at the top of the lobby floor. Now the number of floors, if you recall, we created that expression, number of guest room floors, so we're just going to link those together. Typical floor height, well, we can link that to our guest room height. And then just as you do when you're working in the Floor Manager, we have to give that floor a beginning floor name. Again, this is a name, meaning it's a text string, so we're going to put single quotes, and I'm just going to use floor as the name. And then we want a beginning floor number. So I'm going to use 1, and we're going to base it on floor lobby. And now that set of floors is generated. And then we'll actually create one more floor for the roof. So again, I'm just going to drag and drop my floor node over here. I'm going to call this one floor roof. And this one again we'll do create at building. We'll set our catalog item to floor default. The owning building is still building 01. And we have to give this floor a name. So it'll be roof. And again, I'm going to double click and look at the properties over here. So in this case, again, I need to put in that finished floor elevation. And rather than 0, I'm going to use one of my variables, which is the Z height, the total height of the building. So now we've got all the floors created, and they're actually controlled by our sliders here. So if I were to open the floor manager, you can see here's our building we created, GC Hotel. There's the lobby floor. There's a series of guest room floors, 6 floors, just as our slider shows. And then we have the roof floor. So now I'm going to open up the control panel so that we can see our sliders there and begin to make some adjustments. I'm also going to point out on this control panel there is a hold changes until applied, which means I can make the adjustments to the slider and then apply the changes to the model. So let's make an adjustment to the lobby height. Perhaps we'll reduce it down to 20 feet. Maybe we're going to increase the overall height of the building. Let's go up to 150. And maybe we'll change our guest room height to 13 feet. Now I'm going to apply that. And if I open up my floor manager, notice our lobby height has been changed to 20 feet. We now have 10 guest rooms, all 13 feet, and our roof is at 150. So keep in mind, you're driving that floor manager from here in GC. You can quickly add floors, subtract floors, change floor to floor heights. Immediately updates the floor manager, which means any of your colleagues working on your project with you, even if they're just working in Building Designer, they're going to get the same information. They're reading from the same floor manager. Now in the next module, we'll see how to create building and floor nodes that read the information from the floor manager so that we can go back to our stacking model and we can read this information in, and we could actually link geometry to those nodes so that if the floors do change height, the geometry moves with it.